Eugene Fernandez, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
It is truly an honor to have you here.
It's an honor to be among a person in media that appreciates this type of thing. So
and this is one episode that I've been truly excited about.
Really?
I didn't know that it was going to be you, but I just knew that I needed to do something with history, especially here in the valley.
You had a big target.
Yeah, with the Battle of Palo Alto.
Yep.
So can we start with just a little introduction? That way people know a little bit of your background and who you are. Okay. For those of us that didn't know you before this.
Right. Okay. All right. I'll go back to my early history and tell you how history came into my life. Okay. All right. Number one, my family's been here since the Escondon expedition. And it's 1737 in that region, because we were part of Camargo. Mm-hmm. We were the old families that did Camargo. So I'm telling you about how the historical aspect comes into my family. Okay, and then of course later on, the 13 families that split off and did Matamoros.
Okay,
that's us. We were Solis, the Soliseño.
Yes, Soliseño.
Yeah, that's my family. So I had that background, but I wasn't really aware of all of that back when I was a child. But the one point that was a boom moment of me that really got me into history, and I can actually say with confidence I'm a professional historian. And that's a rare breed down here. They're all dead or they're not existent.
You're not kidding.
All right. The time that history came into my life was very interesting because I was 8 years old when I started getting involved in history. 8 years. And I'll never forget the day that my brother came up to me on his bicycle and he says, "Hey, Gene, there's a monument over in the Old City Cemetery, the one on Madison and 5th, over there, that is bigger than Dallas, and it's got the family name on it. Is that us, And then I said, I don't know. So I went to my mother. I said, "Is this us?" And she said the typical thing that a mother would do protectively. She says, "Ask your father."
Of course.
Because, it was his name. And so he started telling me. And here you can envision a little 8-year-old boy, right? Going like,
That's what I was going to ask. Like at 8 years?
Yeah. And so, how do you say, the bug bit me at that point in time, and I've never gotten over it.
That's I guess that's one way to get into history because you were like, okay, so what's going on? What is up with this?
Yeah,
it has my last name.
Yeah, and it was not boring even as an 8-year-old, because you figure that a child has attention deficit. Pretty much, or is prone to it. Yeah. But I focused on that. I remained focused on it for pretty much the majority of my life. All right. Then I went away for many years. I went to college in New Orleans, and I left here when I was I guess about 18, going on 19 or so, and I used New Orleans. There's a history city. Yes. As my base for about 20 years. And then of 10 years out of that, intermittently, it's pretty contiguous, but nonetheless, I was in Brazil because I left after I got out of college. I went to Brazil and got into precious stones. And that was a trip because I could see history being made around me.
Was this something that happened from college years or after?
No, it happened well before that. It happened because I do things in early sequences. When I was like 12 years old, 12, I had an epiphany. And I can really tell when it happened, when it struck me, is that all of a sudden I started getting interested in Brazil. My father liked Brazilian music and all that, and I really took off where he left. Okay. And so, and then going off into my late high school years, I actually bought a Brazilian flag, and I utilized that as my bedspread and all of that. When I went to New Orleans, whenever I would go across I was on the West Bank, I would go across the river there on the ferry in order to go out to LSUNO.
Yes.
And so I would see the Brazilian ships there. And I'd say, aha. So if I got out of my classes, I'd come back and then, I learned Portuguese in 6 months.
Yes.
And I was fluent. And I would get those beautiful bags of coffee that I would take home and treasure. So therefore, Brazil was in my soul. And like I say about the history being seen with my eyes in South America while I was there from, let's see, it was 72 to 82, if you can imagine that.
I was born in 81.
Yeah, I see that. And so I was, when I got there in 72, they were just finishing up the Che Guevara situation.
Wow.
And my friends were on that detail. My later friends in New Orleans were on that detail. part of the CIA and part of the particular movement in order to do what need to be done.
Yeah.
And then later on, I went through like 4 revolutions down there. That's history making. And I got so tired of what they call a state of siege, because I was there for business.
Yeah.
And then I remember when Stroessner out of Paraguay was bazookaed in his Mercedes. I was there. And when I first set foot on land, it was the president of Chile, Pinochet.
Pinochet.
He was taken out. And when I landed, I saw all of these. They had the old surplus Sabre jets that the Bolivian Air Force had, and then they were going low level. And I saw these armed guards with Thompsons on the rooftops. I said, something's up, and so there was history right before me.
Yeah.
And so I came back to this country, really kind of very anxious to leave revolution behind. I was getting tired of it, and I got into hotel management, and just settled back here in '96.
When somebody experiences something like that, do you actually know at the time that you're witnessing history?
Yes,
or you did?
Yes, I
because
do.
you were aware, you were already interested in all this.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden my mind takes over like you in the old type cameras where you would wind them up, the movie cameras, and I could say, all right, here it comes. But the thing is, God, so sad, is the fact that all of those years that I was in South America and doing all this, I charted it up one time, and it was frequent flyer miles that I could have gotten or whatever. It was, short of 500,000.
Yeah.
So, but I never took a camera. That's my point. I never took a camera with me.
Imagine.
Yeah. Do I ever?
Yeah, and the reason I asked that question because I can relate with, and I wasn't into history when I was young, but with sports, my dad always would call me and say, look, you need to watch this game. It's going to be historic. People are going to remember this day. And I'm like, it's just another basketball game or another football game. But then, looking back, I'm like, wow, I wish I could have paid attention that day that my father was calling me.
Or lucky enough to have a newspaper with it on the front page.
Yeah,
good. Yeah, history's so beautiful.
So then, I guess you came back to Brownsville.
Yep. I came back in '96. My father passed away, and I was on assignment in Mexico City just prior to that because I was in the hotel business. I managed hotels, and I was the director of franchise services for Days Inns of Mexico, and I had 7 properties under me at that point in time. My office was in Mexico City, and so that was when Colosio got whacked.
Oh yeah,
and it was like they went and just turning off the valve. It was immediate. And we could see, my wife and I could see the streets of Mexico City. We lived right there in the Zona Rosa. And there wasn't a soul on the streets. For Mexico City?
Yeah, you're like, something's going on.
Something's going on, and it was going on. So a United States franchise in Mexico City did not work, so they closed it down. I came back to this country, and I took over a couple of hotels in San Antonio, and that's when I received the word that my father had passed away.
Okay.
Now get this. The Thomas Mann, can you go back home? It's a literary phrase and a piece and whatever. Yes, you can go back home. Sometimes you can't. But I came to that decision or the question in my mind in '96. I said, God, you've lived in a number of different places and you've loved them, you've hated them, whatever. Can you go back home?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah. And I did. From '96 on, I've been here, and I've been so happy to be so.
Excellent. So, I guess my question now is: did you already had information regarding the Battle of Palo Alto at that point in your life?
Off and on, the whole plethora of the spectrum of the historical subjects, it crosses across your so-called desk. As you're going through life, because if you see something in the newspaper that is regarding San Antonio missions or the Battle of Brandywine or whatever, you gravitate towards that.
Yes.
And then coming back here, of course, with it being on the map as Palo Alto, it was a subject that came across quite frequently. But now, mind you cannot bring up Palo Alto without the 3 stars in the tiara, right?
Okay.
You got Palo Alto, which was really the first battle. You had a bombardment at Fort Texas, okay? And then later became Fort Brown. Okay, so you got Palo Alto, Resaca de la Palma, and Fort Texas.
Okay.
So those are the broad subject of what you're looking at when you talk about pre-Mexican War.
Okay. And Fort Texas, that what area is it?
At Fort Brown.
Fort Brown. Okay.
Yeah, the moment that
Fort Brown is Fort Texas?
That was, yes.
Okay.
Because the moment that bombardment took place, Major Jacob Brown was knocked out by a sniper there, because the Mexicans had a whole cannon battery on, if you can equate to where there's a subdivision in Matamoros that, let me see if I can, Calle Primera, you know, and then back over there's some very nice homes back over in there. Casamata's right just about a little off on that
yes.
same thing. Okay, well, historically there were cannon batteries in that area there, and of course Fort Texas was right across the river from it.
I see. Yeah,
you know, they were bold; they were right in their face in order to do that, and so the Mexicans, by the particular surveillance and intelligence, military intelligence factors that were going out in the field, they knew that it was going to happen. There was going to be a confrontation.
And that's what I wanted to start with. If we can go back and you can tell us a little bit of what was the scene with the relationships between Mexico and the U.S. before the battle.
Very complicated indeed. But you have to know that in order to be able to really digest and understand why that war occurred.
Okay.
Now I'm going to go into it briefly in terms of what Mexico's situation. And mind you, my commentary, it was all objective. Mm-hmm. I don't have the luxury of opinionating. If I did, you could shoot me right now because I would not be a historian. Yeah. I believe this happened. A conjecture.
Correct.
No. The distilled story that came down over the years wasn't just by one person. Mm-hmm. It was by people, story of the Civil War. It was people in the North and the South and whatever, and they finally wrote history. Yes. And there it was. And we're democratic when we come down to the writing of history. And I trust what the account finally came down to on the Mexican War. All right, here it is in a nutshell.
Let's see.
Is that... granted, you're talking about going back into the 1846. We got to stop on that point right there and understand where the United States was in its what's called Western expansion. Yeah. There was a movement called Destinado Manifesto, which means, seed of shining sea, because all that was out in the Great Plains was territory. Mm-hmm. It wasn't even part of the United States as a territory, as Oklahoma and all these were so-called taken in by, because like Puerto Rico is a territory.
Yes.
Okay. And then you still had the governance of Old Spain, Republic of Mexico, and then, of course, France. And those original claimers of the land. But that got very problematic because when they went off into their exploratory missions like the Mississippi Valley and La Salle and all of those expeditions that went through there, they didn't have cell phones and they didn't have the complicated communications that we have nowadays. And so the typical scene where the guy's there and he's got his sword and he's got his staff and the flag of the country. And then he says, "I proclaim for the King of Spain all of that land." Where's my finger pointing? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all the way. Oh, what do you mean over there? Is it over by that tree? No, by that tree. It's all the way. Yeah. If there's an ocean over there, that's where our land stops. Oh, okay, fine. You see how the complications got? Yeah. Okay, and so then...
And then having so many parties involved, I guess.
It was international treaty.
Yeah.
In the Mexican War, there were actually, and I charted it out, there were something like 7 treaties that really affected it. Because you had the Treaty of San Ildefonso, you had the Louisiana Purchase Agreement and all of that coming through. You had the purchase agreement with Spain to France and then France to Spain. And then the 2 agreements that happened at the Battle of San Jacinto with all of that with Sam Houston. And okay. And so you really if you get through that tangle, you got the impression that the United States had their eyes on all of that open territory out there because that was hard country. I mean, you had the Indians, the indigenes of the Great Plains and all of that, and that was sadly, it was a sad period in our life because they were being displaced.
Yeah.
Now, you know how you push air out of a balloon? Well, I'm going to get to Palo Alto on that.
Okay.
Because when they did the Great Plains, the expansion of the United States at that point in time, and you're talking about all through the early 1800s into mid-century, they went straight that way. They didn't come down here. And so all of the air out of a balloon, the displacement of the Comanches, the Apaches, and the Lipan Apaches and the various other ones, and the Kickapoos for them, they were moved, displaced from the plains, and they came down here. And so this was a real no man's land.
Okay.
Of people that were. It was one of the most dangerous parts of our country.
Meaning the south of Texas.
Yes.
Okay.
And the Nueces and all that. We actually the immediate piece of a parcel, a strip of land, the Nueces Strip, from the Nueces River to the Rio Grande. That was a no man's land because you had all of these displaced people. You see how the treaty took a long time to come up and say, what are we going to do with this land?
Now that you mentioned the Nueces River,
yep.
that was part of the conflict, right?
Yeah.
Or the miscommunications in between Mexico and the U.S.
Well, there was this false theory that really was the established border of old France, the Louisiana Purchase, and the Republic, actually New Spain, when that happened, before the Republic of Mexico. Because the Republic of Mexico didn't take place until 1821, 1823, in that range. So all of these land settlements were really brewing preceding that, and they affected it and all that. So what we had there was the old charts, and I've looked at the old charts and the old treaties for that matter.
Okay.
And Louisiana Purchase and the Louisiana claim to those lands states the Rio Grande.
Okay.
It physically states that.
Yeah.
And then they were also then they got convoluted afterwards, going up into history, as to more practical. We considered the Sabine as the limit. That's there between Louisiana and Texas.
Yeah.
And so you can see how the boundary was the issue at the time.
Yeah.
All right,
now, sorry to interrupt, but the president at the time in Mexico was the one claiming that it was not the Rio Grande.
Right.
What separated the Texas territory,
Santana, the various presidents at that time, but what do you mean the various presidents? Santana was president like 9 times, and that was part of the issue, because what he had proposed more than anything was a centralist government. Okay, centralist means like the DF, Mexico City.
Yeah.
If you want anything done in the entire territorial lands now, you got to get on your horse and go to Mexico City.
Yeah.
So every time a dispute broke out, they went and knocked on Santana's office there as president. And they said, well, change your hat, get your sword. And then he would go off and tend to a dispute like he did in San Jacinto.
Yeah.
So in this particular one, dealing with the Battle of Palo Alto and all of that, they dispatched on a normal basis the troops in order to go out and quell that particular uprising. All right, let's get back to what prompted Taylor to finally take up the mission. And it is, here's how you're going to term it. You're going to, in the establishment of a hard border. Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah.
Because if you got plans for the future, like you got plans for 20 years for Brownsville.
Yeah.
Well, if you got plans for the future so far as what our proposed nation was going to be out, well, how are you going to do it without knowing where the border is?
There's no defined map or line.
That's a fundamental flaw in international treaties, in diplomacy, and trade between the countries and all that. All right, now here's what happened at the time. As I mentioned, Santana was fluctuating in and out of presidency, and as you well know, the powers that be in Mexico City were interchanged between like the 5 families. And that's the way it always has. Like, I'm going to take it this time. You're going to take it this time. I'm going to make some money. You name it.
Yeah.
And so the real struggle was concentrated in Mexico City. And what happened with the United States is they were trying to communicate. And in this book that I have here is the memoirs of this particular volume has like 3 presidents in it.
Okay.
And I'm centering on the memoirs of what happened with James Knox Polk, who happened to be a relative of mine back from my early family. And it states there that it is blatantly, and these are letters to Congress, letters to the envoy from France, the Prime Minister, Britain, you name it. And states that we're wanting to sit at the bargaining table, as you can figuratively see, with Mexico, but they're engaged. They got this skirmish and a power struggle and whatever else, and we can't nail them down. That's the key phrase. We cannot nail Mexico down in order to talk on establishing a treaty between us in order to define the border.
In plain words, they cannot get the 2 parties in the same room to negotiate.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's what's going on.
Because one word came into the picture constantly. Mañana.
Oh.
I will meet with you.
I'm familiar with that.
You are?
With that saying.
Oh, yes. I'm amazed. You rarely see that, right?
Mañana.
Yeah, right. But that's the one thing. They were calling them to the bargaining table so many times it got, because you can see it written here in the history book. And no, we couldn't get together. So that's when Polk sent an exploratory mission to the border here in order to see reconnaissance. It was more of reconnaissance than anything else. Now, mind you, he had a sizable army. You don't say it's a reconnaissance when you got caissons and you got 3,000 mules and the whole thing.
Yeah.
But he was prepared because he knew there was going to be a conflict, so he dispatched his troops. He gathered his troops by volunteer effort from the East Coast, marshaled in New Orleans, and then came on down to what the rudimentary beginnings of Corpus Christi were all about in order to come to Brownsville, that spot on the border.
Of course. And remember when we had breakfast, I mentioned to you as a person that has a little bit of military experience, right? The generals at the time are seeing all this going around in the political arena.
Oh, yeah.
So they know that they have to be getting ready for battle.
Indeed,
it's going to happen.
It was on the forefront of everybody's mind. And if you look at the newspapers of the time, there were the pros and cons of it. You had a political faction that said, we don't want to get involved in all this. And it was a very big issue that entered the picture, of course, was the slavery issue. And they said, well, yeah, what's going on? Because Mexico outlawed slavery when they became a republic. And so there was going to be tangent issues on that. But so yeah, you are right. The generals and the populace, the politicians, were throwing this ball around constantly.
I can only imagine also the journalists at the time, or the people that write the news.
Thank God they did that.
They were like, war is coming.
Yeah,
the tension in Washington and all that, like it happens now.
Sensationalism in journalism.
Yes,
because that sells newspapers.
So there was some of that going on at the time.
Very much so. And the actual headlines, it is real figurative when it happened. Because just prior to, let me get back to how Taylor was arriving on what we call Jackass Flats out there.
Okay.
On the old Indian trail that went to Corpus Christi. And then hence after it was called Taylor's Trail and Taylor's Crossing there at Paso Real. Okay. When he was arriving to the reconnaissance point, he met his army before they crossed the Arroyo Colorado, because that was the real line of demarcation. They saw the Lancers or the cavalry from the Mexican army.
From the Mexican army.
Yeah, I think it was Aristo that had. There were 2 generals that were involved in that, and they said, "Oh, there they are." And so you can see the shaved-tailed guys going, getting ready for a battle. I mean, that's where the battle was going to happen in their minds. And so then, of course, there wasn't a shot fired. And so the Mexican soldiers, reconnaissance people, went back to Matamoros, and then, here we go. And so
with the intel.
Exactly.
That the American military had advanced all the way to.
So the classic newspaper headline that happened is that the skirmish that took place was over by Bluetown. It's called Thornton's Skirmish by Santa Maria and all that. And so that's when the Mexican forces actually ambushed a Major Thornton and his troops, and it goes down in history as Thornton's Skirmish. And so they carried that news back to Congress, and they said, oh, they killed and so the newspaper headline said, American blood has been shed on American soil. And the headline was like this. And so then and then of course Congress declared war.
And just to make sure, this happened in Bluetown area?
Yeah.
Santa Maria area.
Yeah,
for those that are not familiar with the area, that this is along off of Highway 281.
Yes, that's right, on Military Highway.
Okay.
Yeah. That's there's a cannon there and all that. Yeah, marker.
I need to go visit all those places. And then what happens?
Okay, so therefore, Taylor knew that they were arranging for a battle, and so when he was coming in and out of there was a Fort Taylor where the lighthouse is in Port Isabel. Yes. A little north of that was his encampment. It was Fort Taylor. And this one down here was Fort Texas in Brownsville. Okay. So when he was and he had all of his ships and supplies coming through the Brazos of Santiago at the time, they couldn't use Port of Baghdad or the mouth of the river.
Correct.
Because obvious reasons. So then they were landing all of their munitions of war, and then of course the caissons are coming overland and all of that. He could hear the cannons going off. He had already set up camp, and he told his soldiers, "All right, dig the trenches here. We're going to do what's called an earthworks, and it's a bulwarks earthworks for a camp. They couldn't go out there and construct a wooden structures and all that. It was very primitive." And so then he left and he went back to Point Isabel at that time, and then he could hear the cannons going off. He said, "Oh God, what's going to happen?" So the Battle of Palo Alto came about somewhat by accident, by happenstance. It wasn't planned for that spot. Taylor says, "Oh my, I hear cannons. Oh, we better get back to the fort here." So he was on his way back, and that's when the Mexican armies were preempting, and they came up in order to stop him, and that's where the battle was had.
So he was trying to go from Port Isabel to Fort Brown area,
right?
Fort Texas at the time.
Yep.
And they met
at Palo Alto.
At Palo Alto.
Yeah, and it was an encampment there because in military strategy you have to set up and all that. There was a military encampment right there by the Mexican forces because they knew that they had a better chance of getting them on what they call the open prairie. It backfired on them, but didn't know. And so what happened was General Taylor came through, and he had his majors. But let's get back to that. It's a very interesting point. In the majors and West Point, okay? When you're talking about officers and the generals of war and all that, that's a major issue in warfare because that's the tactical brains of any kind of a battle. Well, just prior to that was the beginnings of the United States Military Academy in West Point, okay? And they studied war. They made a point of studying war to develop it into a science. Heretofore, you had an approach to war like, let's get militias up and all that. I actually credit Napoleon with the development of modern warfare at that time. And so West Point studied science of war, and they produced a graduating class at that time that was in attendance at Palo Alto.
Oh.
Yeah. You had all of these generals coming through. Hang on, sorry. You had one general, but you had these majors coming through that went on for history. You had Major Ringgold. You had Major Brown. And you had a number of other majors in there that were supremely talented. And so that was one of the reasons. There are a couple of reasons. I'll line them up as to why that battle fell in favor of the United States.
Okay.
They had in all practicality, they had a superior officer line up there that really outsmarted an opposing army. Okay. And prior to that, Mexico was on the old system where, you remember, I guess in your Spanish Mexico, Nueva España, you had the sons and the grandsons followed their forefathers. And okay, here's your hat.
Yes.
Here's your sword.
Yeah.
And there's your desk, and there's your coffee cup. And whatever. So I mean, you want me to get out and fight? And the hands.
You're the new major. You're the new lieutenant.
I'm not going to fight out there. And so that was kind of like the air at the time. And so when these majors came in, they were very, very serious about war. Now, the other factor that was extremely important in all of this was the weapons, the weaponry of war. What I have here is somewhat of a similar rifle as what they had back in the time of that war. It's called a percussion cap. They had flintlocks and caps at the time. And, of course, they have a ramrod on there.
Yes.
And you can imagine, today you have, your magazines, the clips and all of that. No, they had to do it in very primitive ways, as well as the sword. The sword here is very similar to what they would have had in a cavalry sword. Okay, but get this. And this is a true story that came through from, actually one of the higher-ups from the museum, the Federal Museum that's out there in Battle of Palo Alto.
Okay.
National Battlefield. And they said a key factor in that whole battle was that Mexico, as they were coming up, they wanted the gunpowder and the lead shot and whatever in order to actually perform a battle. Well, this was pre-planned by the United States. Because there was, you've seen these people like Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind, who they sell provisions and all of that. And they're scallywags, but that's their munitions of war. Actually,
there's always someone taking advantage of the situation.
And that's how my great grandfather made his million, is selling guns and dynamite.
Interesting.
Okay, so anyway, so here they were, and the Mexicans came up and they said, "Okay, look, we need gunpowder." Get you gunpowder? Yeah, fine. Well, those kegs of gunpowder, like you normally see on the movies, the top portion of it was primo. The bottom portion of it was a dud. Oh, wow. So when they loaded their cannons up, they would, or if they had any power at all, the cannonball would go. And this is a true fact; it's written in the annals of war. Is the cannonball would go on out, and the United States forces would see it, and they say, "Okay, here it comes," and then the cannonball would hit and roll, and they would get out of the way. So
just like getting out of the way of a football.
Yeah. So therefore, you had superior officers, and then you had that one glitch about the gunpowder and all that, and then of course the United States forces at that time had the beginnings of Enfield rifles. I know in your military history you'd know what Enfield rifle. That's the next step up beyond the flintlock.
Okay.
The Mexican forces had the old Kentucky rifles, the Brown Bess, and then here we have. This is an actual provenance of a musket ball that was from the Mexican forces that I found out on the path where the Mexican soldiers crossed the river and they were going towards Palo Alto. So you had that. In the American riflery and weaponry, you had the conical bullet, which is a lot more accurate. And so you see there, that was a huge factor.
Also,
in the victory
that
was caused, because you can aim, and with that right there, you can almost step out of the way of it.
Yeah, the ballistic advantage of the other shape.
Right, ballistics was where it was all about.
Yeah.
So you see how all of this is coming together to yield what happened in history there.
Other than West Point, why did we have that advantage as far as leadership?
Cultural. Yeah, there was a lot of cultural
and
into
weapons.
Okay. The reason that we had the old school, and I really mean this was old school in Mexico at the time, the Republic of Mexico, is it was tradition at the time, and in the development of the United States at that point in time, and in its colonial expansion and all of that, they had a lot of training, because you had the English, the wars there with England, and also on the West Coast in Oregon and all that. You had the Indian War and all that. So United States, and then of course the 1812 War. So we had seasoned military people there that were fine tuning the art of war. And Mexico had skirmishes that were in the interior of it. You had a huge problem of destabilization.
Yeah.
Remember what I mentioned to you about the centralist movement by Santana and all of his cronies?
Yes.
Well, listen, with the outcome of this war, the Mexican War, if that had not happened, this is a true fact of political geography, Mexico would have splintered off into several different what you'd call chiefdoms or caudillo satellite.
Yes, I heard that word before.
Yeah,
caudillos. Yes.
The caciques,
Yeah.
So that's why they wanted a centralist government, because they didn't want the states to get too much power. But bringing that back into the conversation, the reason that Mexico was really on the verge of not being Mexico is that they were not supporting their states. That's the reason that Texas revolted, because they had taxation without representation, and you had to go all the way to Mexico to get something. They weren't providing them the safety of cuarteles and all of that.
Yeah.
So that was a huge factor in how you had revolt. And Mexico, just at the time, 1846, you had Baja California splintering off. You had Northern California, the Bear Revolt there, it's in history. You had New Mexico splintering off. You see, you had Yucatan, which was a territory, but they were splintering off. You had Chihuahua, who was going to be a separate republic and all. You see how that was all forming?
Yeah.
Because Mexico City was in chaos politically.
Yeah. And yeah, that might be a separate, interesting part of history. Another, but I just want to go back to what we were saying about the superiority of the U.S. when it comes to military and their leaders and the weapons, because growing up in Matamoros, I would always listen to people talk about this, right? So some part of history. They all mention Santana because we're so close to the Alamo and all that, right? So he's one of those figures that people talk about. And I remember hearing a long time ago that at the time Santana had one of the most powerful armies of the world. Yeah. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. Because he was, remember I mentioned about Napoleon? He was a student of Napoleon. Not that he was right there, and I doubt they ever saw one another or were in the company of one another. But that's the one gift that he had to Mexico in warfare, is he took those tactics and he actually instituted that into the program for the Mexican army. And yes, they were. And of course, when they came down to going back a little to all of the Goliad and the Alamo and all of that, it's a formidable force.
Yeah.
And the organization of getting that on the road, getting all those troops on the road and all of that, they were serious about their warfare, you bet. So to even imagine that the U.S. forces in 1846 could overcome, they were apprehensive.
Yeah.
Because they already knew the legend of the Mexican army as being formidable. But yeah, you got to give them credit. And Santana was a general. Above all, he was a general.
Okay.
And then, of course, his other generals that played in history before and afterwards were very skilled people. But there again, the number of skilled people that entered into this conflict from the U.S. side, and they went on. You had Ulysses S. Grant, you had General Sheridan, and all of these that they were part of that graduating class.
From West Point.
Yes, that went on to be hugely successful in military affairs as well as, of course, political affairs, and a lot of them became presidents.
Ulysses S. Grant was at the time brand new lieutenant, if I'm correct. Yeah.
And they were right here.
And some of the documentation of the Battle of Palo Alto, I think, comes from his journal also.
Oh, he had a wonderful ability to keep journals. Yeah, he was a writer. And there's a lot of people don't know that about him.
So now that we know the people involved as far as both sides, the Mexicans and the U.S., and then where they actually meet in the area of Palo Alto, so then the actual battle, what happens? Or
well, the Mexicans were taken by surprise, because if you go back in your history in the way that the movie shows it in the American Revolution, we lined up in in lines and stood and shot at each other, and then the next layer would drop, and then the next layer would go forward. No, it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, you think I'm going to stand in a line with the guns facing me? No. So there was transitions in warfare that took place. And mind you, it goes back in military strategy and history of the Romans. And then Santana was a huge fan of the Roman Empire and how and what it yielded to military science. So yeah, the setup there. All right, let's go back to let's imagine the day that the battle took place.
Okay,
when the first cannons are firing, because they were we were really gentlemanly and almost to the point of. All right, well, you got to wait till it's sunlight because you don't want to be you're a gentleman. You don't want to wait and get in the darkness and all of that. No, All right, 8 o'clock, let's start. So they that's not like that, but anyway, similar. They were saying, okay, well, let's start. So they started, and it's kind of funny to a degree that one of the first incidents that happened is, and I'm going to get to artillery because it was a major issue in this.
Okay.
Is that the cannon firing that took place in the very beginning? One of the first things that they took out was the band
from the Mexicans.
Yeah. Now, and you know how a Mexican is. I mean, I'm Latino.
Yeah.
And if you take away my music, I'm ready to go home.
Yeah.
And then boom, a cannonball hit in the middle of the cluster. So they're there, boom, 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 and going, what do you mean? Yeah. And then a drum went that way, and a guy's hat and his violin, and they say, and so I'm sure, can you just face it? Knowing the Mexicano spirit for music, they say, well, it probably made them mad and made them fight more, but okay.
Makes me wonder if it was done on purpose.
Probably so, because as a psychological effort. And all that. All right, let's get back to that positioning of that cannon. Okay. Mexico, again, was in the old school. You set up your cannons, and you literally take an iron stake, and there's a hole in the tail of it, and it chocks on the wheels, and it's stationary.
Stake it to the ground that way.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of force that goes in a cannon fire, whatever. Major Ringgold, who was killed during that battle, he actually caught a cannonball as he's on his horse. Boom, went through one leg, went through the horse, went out the other leg. And that's why, make sure that. But he was the father of what's called roving artillery, or flying artillery. You take a cannon and you fire it, and you immediately pick it up and go over here. So therefore, the Mexicans went like this, and they went to fire, and then where'd they go?
Yeah,
they were over here. Boom, fire. Do you see the tactical advantage of that? And so that was, again, by the modernized implementation of warfare, that just baffled the Mexican forces.
Was this a tactic maybe that was learned at West Point, or maybe of his own creation as a military tactician?
This is history. He was the father of roving artillery.
Wow.
Prior to that, it wasn't an issue. It didn't even exist, really, for that matter. I mean, from an artillery sense, because artillery is hard to move around and whatever, but they made a point.
What was his rank?
Major.
Okay.
The two majors killed in that battle, which really just demoralized Taylor to a great degree. But
Major Ringgold, and the other one was Fort Brown.
Major Brown. Jacob Brown.
From I'm sorry, Jacob Brown. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so they had that roving artillery. And all right, to answer your question about the outcome, I've seen in more writings than ever that it was considered a draw.
Yeah, I saw that, and I just
discounted it.
Yeah.
I said, what do you mean a draw? Because if that had been the case, then Taylor would have gone back to Point Isabel, and then but it didn't go that way. Is that the Mexican army went over to Resaca de la Palma, and that's kind of like a thicketed area.
Resaca de la Palma, and sorry to interrupt, but this is the area that is here a little bit closer to the middle of the sea, right?
It's by Crestview and all that off of Paredes Line Road.
Off of Paredes Line Road, yes.
So they went over there, and again, the tactics by the general at the time were sound, because they said, we're going to take them into the chaparral, which is the thicket, all of the and we're going to nest in there, and we're going to make them come in after us, and we can gain the advantage of warfare. It didn't work. Yeah. Because, again, if they went into the thicket, well, we pounded that thicket with the cannons and all of that, so that they're wondering, that they were actually trapped in there. The last portion of the fight, and this is in recorded history as well, was that they dropped their guns at that point in time. Now, this is a brave army. This is like you say, one of the finest in the world at that time.
Yes.
But they were so overwhelmed with this and with the artillery barrage and all of that they literally dropped their weapons and they ran for the river. And a lot of them did not make it through. They commandeered the ferries that they could, and they went on back to Matamoros.
Also, some of the stuff that I read was that the U.S. military was using 18-pounders.
Yes.
And 6-pounders, so they had the ability to go big or a little bit more light and small.
Yeah, it's like a howitzer.
And I think the Mexicans were only using 6-pounders at the time.
Okay, so you got the numeration correct. Okay, good. Yeah, that I knew that there was a difference in size, and size makes a lot of difference in a cannonball.
Of course, yeah.
And they also had exploding cannonballs as well. So that if you can imagine a large cannon, boom, and what kind of an area would that wipe out?
Sending all the shrapnel and stuff.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, they had grape shot. And then here's something I'm very proud of. This is it's slag. The origin of this slag, and I talked to, number one, on the trying to define what this was. Mm-hmm. I talked to an expert, and that was Rod Bates. God bless him. He's no longer with us. He said, that's a Kentucky rifle. All right, on this one right here, this was found there in the Longoreño, where they came across in Southmost. This one right here is grape shot. Now, that was used by both armies. If you imagine, it's a canister that's shot out of a cannon, and then and all these shot go
separate.
So it's like a buckshot type of thing. Yeah. And I found this on the west side of Brownsville, right about where the Sam Stadium is. They were digging in there, and that shows the retreat. This was the advance, and this one was the retreat. But this one was from the Mexican army. Because what they did was they had the copper mines in Zacatecas, and the slag that they utilized, and this is something that was told me by Manuel Hinojosa, because he's an archaeologist.
Okay.
And I called him up. He was with BISD at that time, and I said, Manny, they're digging over here on BISD property. Can I go in there and snoop around? He says, yes, Gene, go ahead. And I found this in a pile that had been washed away by the rain, and being oxidized green like that is shown out. But this was what the Mexican army had that they were shooting back at the U.S. forces with.
Someone that is not trained like you, I guess, in a history. And also, you mentioned something about having your a trained eye. Right?
You have to have the eye.
For yes, like I would think that's just a toy, or maybe a some kid plastic ball that they lost.
I went on to that. It was a mound, right? Because they had dug up. If you know, on West Elizabeth there by Landreth Smith, the base of the Sam Stadium. Mm-hmm. Okay, they were digging down to do something. I don't know what they're doing. Or parking lot, but they got to do drainage. And so I saw this huge mound of earth. And I looked up on it, and this thing was sticking out of the mud like that. And it had that green look. And I went into that situation looking for green, you see? Yeah. Because I said, Gene, if you're going to find something, either a brass belt, like a belt buckle, or buttons, you're going to see green. And so when I saw that color green, I said, I got it. Yeah. Yeah,
because if I was there, I would be looking for the shiny brass, but this been in the ground.
No, that's 1846.
Yes, that's 1846.
Exactly. It'll be oxidized.
Yes, of course. So you have to know a little bit. Yeah. It makes me wonder also, like how many pieces of history has people here from Brownsville, from the area, found that we don't know about.
Well, there is a tragedy in that because I've talked to the anthropologists, archaeologists, and then the hobbyists that go through with the metal detectors and whatever. And in that particular field, if you cannot disturb a battlefield and get away with it, because number one, it's the law of antiquities in Texas. That's why you can't go out to Palo Alto now with a metal detector. Number one, it's federal lands. And number two is that a battlefield reads like a book.
Yeah.
And the artifacts that you're going to find on that and where they are.
Yes.
Will show you
location.
Yeah, where the movement is. If you found this in somebody's garage right here, where'd you get this? Oh, I got a flea market. Well, did they tell you precisely where it was? No. Just this old guy went out there and he had a collection and this was it. I asked him. He said, I don't know. You see how history loses in a situation like that? Because we can't piece it together. In the illegal art market, like you have all over the world, it is the bane of our existence, because you have these looted treasures from the old civilizations. Like all of those years I was in South America, we had the Imperio Incaica. That there are artifacts all over from the Inca period of their occupation.
Wow.
And so I would go into the markets and whatever, and I would see things, and there's no way you could tie it back. But if it had styles, those mochikachimu, where you could say, oh, that's a stirrup vase, and you could say, well, it came from here. But you lost all of the book slammed shut on what you would find that people would bring out of the ground. And that happens here in Brownsville. I talk to people, I got a cannonball. Where'd you find a cannonball? Oh, no,
it's given to me by my family member that is no longer here.
Yep.
Yeah. He told me where he found it, but I never paid attention. I don't remember.
Never paid attention,
It was not in my interest.
Yeah, but all of this really, the great book of history that all this goes into, a lot of us will not find fascinating. But those that do, and they weave a story based on the validity of provenance of where you got this thing, that is an attractive tale. It really is.
If someone that maybe listens to this podcast and they know they have something that probably belongs to, and they want to come forward, but they don't want to get in trouble, like
no, there's no way to get in trouble in a case like this. If you have something that because the active period, and you don't have the archaeology police around every corner and going to grab you by the back of the neck. You're coming with me, son. Yeah. No, that's not the case. The thing that's important is that, you're right. If there's somebody out there that has an artifact, no matter if their grandfather didn't tell them, we're not going to confiscate it. I say we. I was with the museums here for a number of years, and it's not a type of thing where you have punitive actions and all of that.
Okay.
But in the event that a person does have a piece and it really is, it settles out that it is a piece of history.
Yes.
It contributes, like the Pineda stone at the mouth of the river and all that, pre-conquest and post-conquest. Then come forward and make it known to the press or to me as a historian.
Yeah.
I've got a good relationship with the press, and we can talk about it and discuss it and whatever. And then,
or if they want to go somewhere, where's a good place to go
to do what?
To turn over stuff, or maybe they want to just share with someone. My
honest suggestion: University of Texas.
Okay.
Yeah. The University of Texas is, it's Valley, UTRGV. They have a collection with the special collections part of it that is significant. And then, of course, the Texas A&M out of Kingsville is really coming up into prominence. I'm not going to tell you to go to a museum institution that we have here. I'm just not going to do it.
Okay.
But the thing that's important though is that if you have academia, where you have the curriculum of history at the UTRGV, there's usually you got a PhD that's involved with that. Consult with them and say, here's what I have done. Even if all right, how many of these do you think are out there? You see, cannonballs. This is a scene in an area of Texas where major battles were conducted. So I mean, it's not going to stand out, but I really encourage that to step forward and at least let somebody in academia be aware of it, because there might be something on it that's strange. I'll tell you a story that was very. Now I look back on it and I say, "Oh my God, Gene, how could you let this happen?" Is that I went to St. Joe, and we're talking about the years in 65, 66, and all of that in that period there. Well, at that period in my life, I lived out away from the city in the area of Palo Alto. Okay.
Okay.
And I remember my father. You like mordidas? You get along with
mordidas?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I was doing very poorly in my schooling because I was watching the girls and all this. He says, "Son, hey, you're not getting good grades at all. Here, let me up the ante here. You want a horse?" I said, "Yeah." You got my attention, right? So son, if you bring up your grades to a B level, I'm going to get you a horse. So I'm tying this into the story. What happened is I got that horse. And then I went out into the lands that were around Palo Alto because I live out in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going across what was then a cotton field that had been mowed. And I love it when the rain comes because you can see it washes off the things.
Yeah.
There was a white object out there about where I had my camp with my horse and my dog. And I went up to it and I picked it up. It was a fossilized seashell. From what period? I do not know. You're talking about, well, the Delta formed 10,000 years ago, you see. Okay. So this piece I found, and I thought that because with my historical bent,
how big?
Nice. It was about like that. And it was a caracol, whatever you call it, but conch shell.
Yes.
Okay. So I took it into St. Joe to the person there was the head of the science department at the time. And I just gave it to him, and I have no idea where that. But you see that particular piece right there, in terms of somebody being able to, paleontologist or whatever, being able to look at this. This is like, that makes the difference right there.
Yeah.
Similar situation that happened. As a matter of fact, I've got another one of these that came from Southmost, but it came through a friend of mine, Rusty Monses, the old Monses people out there, and he told me a story. It was harrowing. He said that his father found a bronze stake. Okay, you can imagine a bronze stake, but like a walking cane, but it was thicker, and it was very strange. It had like some hieroglyphics on it.
Wow.
On this, it was a marker, and maybe for where a treasure was buried or whatever, But he found that on his property, and they had it at the house there. Well, his older brother wanted some beer money, so he took it and he took it off to the scrap metal and sold it to Wilkinson.
No way.
So you see how these artifacts tell us our heritage.
Yeah.
And if they go off in the wrong direction,
Yeah, Monsi's property was right there.
Yeah.
By the border.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I have another one of these, but in iron that came from him. But there was all kinds of skirmishes that took place in there.
Yeah.
Whether this particular piece was aimed at a human, I do not know. Because if you really talking about where the skirmish of the battle was, pre-battle and elsewhere, because if this had been shot from Arista's troops to it, they would have known about it and would have shown up in the annals of war. Hey, there's a skirmish for you.
Yeah.
But they had colonization out there since, actually, this could have been from 1848. They still used the musket balls at that time.
Yeah.
But all of that, like you say, the artifacts of war are very interesting.
All right, so let's go back to the battle. You last mentioned that now you have parts of the Mexican army fleeing and getting away from Resaca de la Palma.
Right.
Right. I'm assuming they're leaving also their equipment and stuff, and they're just running.
Yes.
Was that the whole army or just part of the army?
That was the whole army.
Was Arista. General Arista was the one leading the...
Right. As I remember correctly,
was he there?
Arista was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But you had, if I remember correctly, there were two pincers that came through, one from Longoreño and the other one by Santa Cruz, which was, bear in mind, Brownsville wasn't even there at the time.
Correct.
There were like two jacales over here on this side because it was the commons. It was grazing lands.
Mm-hmm.
The actual town site, Colonia of Matamoros, was on the other side of the road. So all of this over here, there weren't structures, there weren't people or whatever. So it was just there were little farms out in the community. I had the Cajapinta rancho that was downriver and all of that, and just a little house there was there. So it was very sparsely populated.
Yeah.
When they came through, they didn't have to come through and go down Elizabeth Street.
Correct.
They went through by where the old model laundry was, where this was, and then work their way through the brush.
Yeah.
To just cross the river. And if you really get down to it, they did not have the Santa Cruz crossing because there wasn't a city to go to.
Yeah,
they might have had a little chalan.
Yeah,
and that was it. And then if they actually tried to swim the river, the majority, and there were fatalities on that front as well. And then now get this: is that once they marshaled with the cuartel there in Matamoros, they immediately got orders from their higher ups, either in Victoria or Monterrey, to evacuate. Let's retreat in order to marshal, because there's going to be a confrontation coming on, and that's exactly what happened. Because I can't imagine how long it would take to get to Washington and say, okay, what's our next move? President says, well, go after him. Okay, and he go on back. But that's exactly what happened. They came here, and Taylor was under orders to go as fast as possible. Get the steamships here and go all the way up to Camargo. That was his crossing point where he went to the Battle of Buena Vista and all that. And so that was the big push going off inwards. Any semblance of a military force was non-existent in Matamoros at that time.
Got it. So was there any prisoners of war there from the Battle of Resaca de la Palma?
I'm sure there was, but I'm not privy to that information. I'm sure that you'd have surrender of a certain amount of troops. There was no incident that was surrounded that, and I'm sure that we did not have the cruel aspect, nor did Mexico have the cruel aspect of all right, we're going to just mow down all these prisoners, out of retaliation. No, that didn't enter into into warfare at that time.
The reason I asked that question is because some of the criticism that I read online of General Taylor was that he didn't go after the running party of the military to finish them off, right?
I see your point. Yes, right.
So I wonder, maybe he had a handful of taking care of what was going on.
He didn't want that to bog him down.
Exactly. Like, that's no longer important. Like, I have here a bunch of prisoners, and I wonder. So what happened with General Arista?
I'm sure he retreated. At that point in time, the major city in this area here was in Monterrey. And of course, that's where the larger cuartel was and all of that. Because if you're talking about Victoria, that was significant. That was the capital of Tamaulipas at the time. But all these little satellite cities on the border, like Reynosa and all those, they didn't enter into it. Those were abandoned. And actually, when word got around, and there was one of the figures in Brownsville history, and I actually have a diary from an old fellow that was interested in history, and he had a handwritten diary, and he says that he was in his field, and there I mentioned you had the commons, the grazing lands of Matamoros, and he was working with whatever crops he had, maize or whatever it was, and this guy came, running by him, out of breath, sweating and all that, and he was in the field, and he says, "Córrele, ahí vienen los gringos," because they actually did the sweep of the land to get out of there. So he dropped everything, and then he went to as a civilian. He went to Matamoros.
Very, very interesting. All
dramatic.
This. When we travel the streets here in Brownsville, downtown, especially downtown, we see all these names, and most of us don't know what they mean or why were they named like that, right? So this tells us a little bit of...
It paints it, doesn't it? Yeah. What I tell the little squinklies that I have in my tours from the junior high and all of that is that I have, like 30 students in a class at a time. And then here's the beautiful part about it, to a degree, to me it is that you're never going to capture all of them, right? But there's a class of 30, 25 of them are going like this. And then 5 of them are going like this. Whatever. So
exactly.
what I tell them is, I said, you can paint color into your life, because if you looked at that field out there in Southmost, and it's just no field. Whether it had weeds or sorghum, whatever. But if you know the history, then it is so much more colorful to have your life filled with filling in those blanks. and knowing, and you see, you can draw your own heroes out of that too.
Of course.
Because from the very beginning, Matamoros and Brownsville have been twins. And they're joined at the hip. They're Siamese twins.
Yeah.
And so you have heroes, wonderful heroes that come in from the Matamoros side and then from the Brownsville side. And in times of war, like during the revolution, during the 1910 revolution, we had people over here that aided to the refugees that came across, and vice versa.
Yeah.
You know? And then when the Yankees came down in 1864, well, we went over there, you know, and then gathered like a mother hen underneath the wing and all of that. So there's always been a symbiotic relationship in between the two cities here.
Yeah.
Or whether it's been war or not.
Yeah, good to know. Yeah, and hopefully someone that is listening, and if they learn just a little bit of all this history
and appreciate it,
and if they're driving or walking down downtown Brownsville and they see all these names, now it means something, and they, like you're saying, now it brings a little bit more color into.
Yeah, because a cotton field is kind of boring, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you didn't realize that was in there.
Yeah.
I just got in a conversation, let's see, when was it? Either last night or this morning, that'll embellish, hit upon what you just said. I'm making a proposal where we're going to do an atlas of the buildings in Brownsville that are significant and the names that you see. Is there one out there right now? No.
I have no idea.
You know these brochures and all that?
Mm-hmm.
It's called ephemera. You know, it's not in existence. So we're actually in talks right now about painting the landscape a little bit more colorfully by saying, here's what happened here. Here's what happened here. George Washington slept here, or whatever. You know, going through and making a canvas that's much more colorful for us to appreciate history by.
Yes. Any other details about the battle that we might be missing?
Well, you got to consider the landscape at the time, and you know, I'm definitely a monster in a particular degree because I'm born in the wrong century. When people ask me about time, I say, well, I calculate in centuries, not what happened an hour ago. I can't even remember what happened an hour ago.
Yeah.
But I just find it so beautiful to think back. If I were just like dropped out of space. Right there out by Palo Alto, and looked around and saw the emergence of, remember that movie Little Big Man with Dustin Hoffman, where he just happened to be in particular places like Little Bighorn with Custer, and he happened to be there going with his mule, and the battle took place in front of him, you know, and whatever. So I'd just like to have been on that horizon there in Jackass Flats. Now, do you know why they call it Jackass Flats?
No.
They named it after me. No. No. Actually, the book that I gave you right here tells of the very land, and I wrote this book a couple of years ago. Jackass Flats was that whole area of what you'd call sawgrass and whatever that is there on the salt flats between Brownsville and Port Isabel. There at the time, and my father even tells me this, and when he was growing, because he was very, very astute when it comes down to noticing things about history. They would go towards the beach at the time. The beach wasn't South By. We didn't have a bridge.
Yeah.
We were talking about the 1930s. They would go towards Boca Chica, Del Mar Beach, and there were like thousands of burros and horses and all of that were out there just in herds. So
in the wild.
Yeah, and they'd have to stop the car because all of this giant herd could go through. Well, that was Jackass Flats.
Jackass Flats.
That Taylor had to come across and navigate around the herds of burros and horses at that time. And the way that they got there was that when all through the centuries coming through from when the Spaniards were going up with those treasure ships and going back and forth, a hurricane would take place and the ship would, and the humans were very fragile.
Yeah.
But a horse and a mule, you know, they would get out, and so they survived and they multiplied until there were tens of thousands of those beasts out there on the prairie at that time that Taylor would have encountered, and I would have loved to have seen that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I always think, often I think of history like that. If I can just like be an spectator back in those years just to see what it was like, you know, like I'm very interested on the mindset of the actual soldier, the one that was there in the front lines. What was he thinking? Like,
what did he have to endure?
Yeah.
We couldn't have gone through that.
Yeah,
we want our air conditioning. We want a pair of shoes that it's comfortable, insoles, and these people had to endure. I mean, we didn't even have off.
Exactly.
Can you imagine going through without
Yes.
Rolaids or these things? They had to endure that. They were superhumans.
Those are the details that I'm interested in, right?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of uniforms were they wearing for the weather, the brutal weather here in South Texas? Wool, imagine?
Yeah.
Out in the
government
sun?
contract on wool cloth.
We're here working in T-shirts, and we cannot work efficiently for more than an hour or two.
And you didn't have antiperspirant either.
Yeah.
Coming through. So, I mean, I figure it this way. During the Civil War in particulars, do you think that cotton was abundant?
Yeah.
No. So that's wool right there.
So wool, imagine. And then what was the food like? What were they eating? I mean, there had to be a big logistic operation in order to feed this army, right? And
that's right. And it wasn't catered on platters from New Orleans either. I mean, this is like on a cook stove, and they were lucky. Like this particular shot right here may have, most likely, as I said, it probably wasn't aimed at a human. And that dent that's in there didn't come from a human skull. It probably was from people living off the land and hunting javelina. And deer. There was a lot of deer back in the old days here, so they had to forage from what they could get. And the history of the Indians coming through this area, the indigenes coming through, you had the various tribes that would come through, and they were the descendants of what's called Tamaulipecs.
Okay.
It was a post-Mayan migration that came into the coastal range, and they were very lucky to be on the coast because you had an abundance of wildlife and fish and shellfish, and then of course your wildfowl, the birds, and all that. So the accounts that come through with the history of what they lived off of and what it must have been like to have to do to get your food with an arrow. I found a beautiful arrowhead right there at Palo Alto. Oh God, this must have been 60 years ago, a little bit more than that. And I was going along, and there was a canal that had been dug on the side of the lago, because they got the San Martin Lake that was at the foot of the hill, the Palo Alto. We call it Rattlesnake Hill. Yeah. And so I was going along with a buddy of mine, Enrique Manatu. He says, look, and a perfect arrowhead. So again, if you were to go back into time and see what was going on, you could see some Apache, going through with a goose that he'd gotten with his arrow and going back to camp and all of that. Fascinating prospect.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's I sometimes, think of just going in time and seeing some of these battles and some of these events through history.
Oh, you can hallucinate on that.
Yeah, but it's impossible. We can't do it. All we do is we have the books, right? That it's a window to that. And every different author that you can read, it tells you a different perspective, right?
You bet.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that either. They always say that the history is always written by the victors, and all of that. To a degree, sometimes it may be true. But there again, you get different flavor. You don't go into an ice cream shop and just look for vanilla. Or
correct.
You got all of those flavors coming into the picture, and so that's interesting, and it helps for a historian such as myself. It gives a different perspectives, and it might pick up on where somebody else left off.
Exactly.
Like saying, "Oh, did you know about the gunpowder? Or did you know about the cuisine or whatever they had?" So that they may have an in on that.
Yeah.
It says, "Oh, that adds to the picture."
Yeah.
Broaden the perspective.
Yeah. Is there a different version of the Battle of Palo Alto being told in the Mexican side?
I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is. And I'm very sensitive to that. I'm very sensitive to that because history may have been written by the actions of a battle, but I'd say the research might have been gone into it, and then it was written by what the observations were all about. You see, two distinct different camps, and so if Mexico was there, surely they're sensitive about you don't lose a war and really feel good about it, especially from the human aspect of the people that died in the war. All right, now let me give you a little update on. Remember, I mentioned the 3 stars and the tiara.
Yeah,
we did. We got the national battlefield for Palo Alto.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing. Let me stop on it. Do you know what Palo Alto means?
Just large tree, I guess.
Okay, get this. It
Tall
technically means, in linguistics,
Mm-hmm.
it means the high thicket, or palo literally means a stick, right?
Yeah.
Like bâton rouge, red
Yes.
stick. Okay, well, it really means the high range, where you have a cluster of, as I say, the chaparral, the granjeno, the iron thorn, and the mesquite, and the cactus, nopalitos, and all that. That's what Palo Alto means, as opposed to a sand prairie, a sand sheet prairie. That you go up through the King Ranch and you see the little sand dunes and you see a prairie there. There's no cluster of trees. So Palo Alto means it's more of a cluster of vegetation, and that's why that was named there. You have Loma Alta, which is that big hill there that I was talking about.
Yeah.
But that's a little bit over to let's say the northeast of where the Battle of Palo Alto was. Now, there's a controversy in where Palo Alto, where the museum is now,
yes,
where they call the National Battlefield.
Right off
Palo Alto
of
National
511 and
Yeah.
Paredes Line Road. Yeah.
There's a controversy there, and God bless her. I was very close to Miss Ituria, and she was part of that original movement in order to get a national battlefield there.
Okay.
And it literally was a case that you got to get Washington's attention. How are you going to do that? Like, hey, we want to do a park, a national park. Oh, yeah, a national park. And you and who else?
Yeah.
Well, the way that this is very interesting, and it came from her mouth, Miss Ituria. I loved her. She says that they were toying around to see about getting a national battle because of significance. I mean, my heavens, the Mexican War was started right here in Brownsville.
Yeah, exactly.
It changed the topography of the nations right there. So how are we going to do that? We're just going to leave it behind, and then it's going to be a forgotten part of our history.
Yeah.
And so she literally got together, and she had a friend of hers that was in Houston, and I don't know, I don't remember the name of the family, but they're in with some oil monies and all this. And I think her friend has the largest Budweiser distributorship in Texas. I could party all night on what their value is, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they started talking, and they started doing little committees and all of this in order to see about, hey, let's get a national battlefield here and get a presence of the Department of the Interior. They did it. They pulled it off. Miss Ituria, of course, with their dynastic wealth and whatever, couldn't quite do it. So she pulled all these people in, and they did it. Okay.
Wow.
Now get this: they were in a formative session planning. Okay, well, here's where we're going to put the display, the museum actually, and here's going to put the trails and all this, and here's where the battlefield was. Well, Miss Ituria was privy to information that she could see that was a ploy. When I say a ploy, it means that they were trying to lead you over here on a story that wasn't true. Because the true archaeologists and the ones that Miss Ituria talked to in the preliminary talks and all this knew where the battlefield was. The battlefield is over in a different area. Why? Because you're going to have the plunderers, the people with the metal detectors now coming in here. It was a decoy in order to get them away from where the real battlefield was. True story.
So where is the real?
I don't know. But there are people that do know.
But it has to be around the same.
It is, yeah, it is.
Area.
But if you put a confined area in there, people are going to concentrate. You know how big that territory, like I say, Jackass Flats is.
Yeah.
From that point, 511, all the way to Los Fresnos.
Yes.
And then
it's all open land.
Yeah, and then to Bayview, and then on this side over here, Olmito. That's a huge bowl.
Huge.
So if you tell people, if you publicize, hey, that pasture right there was where all the skirmish took place.
They'll all be looking for treasures.
They're going to be on there.
Yeah.
So the real location of the battlefield is kept a secret for reasons.
But is it being worked on by archaeologists or people?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Grand studies have already occurred in order to be able to discern, well, there's a huge amount of cannonballs or of your lead ball shot is in such and such a place and all that. So they can map out the positioning of where the actual skirmishes took place. Now, if you really know your topography and you know how the landscape was and all of that, you could kind of read into that. You can say, here it is. Well, here's a large map, but it shows you here. I don't know what camera I'm going to be on. Am I all right with this?
Yeah, a little bit more face if you want to square here with this. Yeah.
All right. There is, on this, there's where Brownsville, Matamoros was. Okay. Then you have Resaca de la Palma, Midway. You follow that so far?
Yes.
Then up here, you have Palo Alto. Now, what they really do, they don't show you where the real lakes in San Martin and all that come through. This point is, so this is San Martin Lake right there, okay? Where Loma Alta is, and that's the big hill, and it's a natural occurrence. Yeah. It's the highest point in Cameron County. That is over to the northeast of that. So to answer your question is, where was the battle? Yeah. It is in, it's not far from where they have it designated right now. Yeah. But it's conveniently inconspicuous as to be in that range. Yeah. You see there. Yeah. For the sake of historical preservation. Yeah. Now that's a real inside piece of information that you have there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Now, yeah, and part of me is like, I can't be mad. I can't, happy. It's because I'm glad that somebody's kept it secret so that we can have more. As long as they're sharing it with us, right?
Yeah, the story.
The story, and if they find more stuff that might change a little bit of the history of.
Well, there's a huge amount of your objects, the actual lead shot and the cannonballs and all that they do have beyond what they have at the museum there. There is a large cache of that at the historic Brownsville Museum, and it's up in an attic someplace. And what do you need to see 150 cannonballs for?
Yeah, just if you show me one, what one looks like, the rest of them look the same.
They're all round. They all look the same thing. Yeah. So I mean, you do, and then of course the archaeologists with the social archaeologists and all that with the Department of the Interior have different caches of them, whether they be in the Smithsonian, whether they be in the National War Museum or whatever else. So that tells the story right there.
So some of the artillery pieces or the cannons that were used in the battle, some of them are the ones there at that. No, they're not.
Those are you in on the roadside that says this is done by the Daughters of the American Revolution or the Texas Daughters of the Revolution, whatever it is. Those were given in 1936. Those particular cannons were given in 1936, and then let's see where they are. They got one there at the intersection of Paredes and 511, right?
Yes.
Okay.
By the entrance, yeah.
They got another one, as I mentioned, out by Bluetown, and you notice they're the same type of cannon, right? Yeah. And then, they've got another one that is there with its muzzle pointed up there out by the Fort Brown Golf Course where Fort Texas was. Okay. They've got one, and then there's a little plaque there that's commemorative of the battle and Jacob Brown and all that. So that's three of them, right? They had various other ones, and if I were to sit here and think long enough, I could tell you where another one is in Cameron County. Who knows? But those are naval cannons. Huh. Yeah. They acquired them. The Daughters of the American Revolution or the Daughters of the Texas Revolution, whatever it was, it says it on the plaque. Yeah. They acquired them en masse. There was like, I don't know how many of them that they bought as from the government, military surplus, and then they utilized those and they put a granite plaque on it and all of that. So those did not come out of the battle at all. Battle. They're just they're just commemorative pieces that look similar. Correct. There are some stories about the particular types of cannon because you have field artillery, And then you have your fixed cannon, like those. You can imagine them on a ship where they have their stocks and all of that. They come out of the hole.
Yeah.
As opposed to field artillery, which has wheels.
Exactly. Larger wheels.
Yeah, depending upon the size of the cannon. There was a story that I heard not too long ago, how there were original field pieces, cannon, that were in inventory someplace in the United States. That was in the government museum, I believe, in the government museum, that they actually had a tag of following on as to, all right, well, this originated from the Battle of Palo Alto. Wow. And I haven't followed up on the story. But now here's another story that you're going to see, hopefully, before I pass on. I was part of a committee back in the year 2016.
Okay.
Where one of our museum, because I was with the museum at the time, one of our museum representatives, he was a worker in the museum, was very interested in history, and he says, let's form a committee to actually form, because, all right, you've got a national designation for the Battle of Palo Alto, national battlefield. You got the national battlefield there at Resaca de la Palma. You don't have anything on the mother of them all, which is where the bulwarks was at Fort Brown. You see, so we were forming a committee, and we had about 6 or 8 people on there. You had my friend with the museum. You had Walter Plitt, who was a heck of a historian, and he was one of the major figures that actually made the museum at Palo Alto possible. All right, and we had some key people on this that were going to resurrect the thought of actually doing a fort in there at the Fort Brown Golf Course. You see? Oh. And making it a national Department of Interior site, a national battlefield, because it's not.
Yeah, and people are probably confused just like me.
Yeah.
Because we hear, Fort Brown and Jacob Brown Auditorium, but where's the actual buildings that represent the actual fort and all that? Like,
all right. Well, then there weren't any to begin with. Okay. I get this. There were several stages of Fort Brown.
Okay.
When they first started up at the call of duty, when you had 1846, right? Mm-hmm. That was a mobile army. They were in tents, and then in order to do their fort, it was a fortified sessions. Is that?
That's
I turned it off.
Don't worry.
Let me turn it off again. I'm in session. I'll call you back. That was Hollywood. They're trying to get me to play. I'm bringing in Johnny Depp in order to do my life story.
Yeah.
I don't
Johnny
have time
Depp or Brad Pitt.
Yeah, I don't have time for him. All right. What were you on the story of?
No, about the location of actual Fort Brown in the area. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So this committee that I was on, we really got going on it. And we had, who was the department? He was a member of Congress that was here, and he's no longer in Congress. There was Reynaldo Garza, there was a judge, and then the other one was the other counterpart from Harlingen was judge. Anyway, it was his son who was our member of Congress. Okay. He got the initial bill passed through the House of Representatives.
Okay.
Because he takes the House and you to the Senate.
Yeah.
In order to get a national park.
Correct.
Done. So we got it done there. And then what happened is that Walter Plitt died, and he was a real key figure in this. And then this particular congressman went out of office and whatever, but we had it on Cornyn's desk. Cornyn was the Senate. In order to do the final thing, in order to ratify with the Department of Interior, because that piece of land right there where the Fort Brown Golf Course was, that is International Boundary and Water Commission land. It is their property. It's a step where the levee is and all of that.
Yeah.
That's federal land.
Wow.
But there was an issue whereby the golf course was actually the property of Texas Southmost College. So there was land. They finally got it all sorted out. And so that land that's there now went over positively in the hands of the Department of the Interior.
Okay.
So they are amenable to us go ahead and pursuing a national park there. Okay. But it got put on Cornyn's desk, and then we had our political issues within the last, last 5 years that stalled it. And I actually communicated with Cornyn's office in order to see about carrying this on. Walter Plitt's widow, out of deference, I didn't want to take the flag and, hey, I'm going to do this now. I let her, ask, you want to carry this on, and we were all in agreement with it, but we never got going on it. All right, so chalk it up. That's a project that we must do to finally get. We have the Palo Alto, finally get a National Park Service to dedicate that land and do a static display and all that. They're not going to recreate the bulwarks, the earthworks of the original Star Fort. You've seen how the old fort was there, okay? Because you can't tamper with existing deteriorated, presence on the landscape.
Okay.
They're going to do a display that's adjacent to it, where the old cart barn was for the golf course and all of that. Yeah. But it has to be done. Now get this: it's a sensitive issue. Why? Obvious reasons. The Mexican-American War. You see, it launched that whole effort. But, and I'm very close to the consulate here, Consulado Mexicano, and they, they have a right to honor their dead as well. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not the type of a thing where we're going to put, and I'm not the architect of the final development of this, but it'd be so beautiful to draw those 3 points together and then have a presence there that would be binational. That would, after all, it's called the Mexican-American War.
Yeah.
So then whatever, it have to be, because of the ownership of the land, it'd have to be done by the Department of the Interior, the federal government. But that would be a presence there, literally a piece of holy land for both nations to honor their dead. And you literally would have the Mexican flag there and the United States flag there to commemorate that. Do you see the importance of that?
Yeah, of course. Now that you mentioned the dead, right?
Yeah.
What is the estimate of both sides? How many people or soldiers were killed in this battle?
It was pretty close. Does that shock you? Because I mentioned before about the advantages of war.
Yeah.
The figures that I've seen it was pretty close, but it doesn't tell the whole story as to the outcomes of war are far different from battles.
The only number that I remember on reading was from the supposed draw between the two armies.
Yeah.
There was a lot more documented dead from the Mexican army than the American side. There was only like 9 against 120 some.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you see
something
there
less
again,
than 10, and then I was like, "Well, how is this a draw?" But I mean, anyway.
Yeah. Okay. But now there again, battles are famous for saying, "Well, we only lost 5."
Yeah.
And so it's a superfluous point as to how many do you claim. The bottom line is how did our nations come out afterwards there? And I'm just going to drop one little point because it's a huge subject. Because you get off of this, then you go immediately into the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and we'll have that conversation later on.
Okay.
You see,
and I would love to have you back.
Yeah. All right. It is a very deep subject, but I'm going to say this: is you've got a compadre with me in the fact that there's a lot of misconception about how this battle right here led to a situation whereby all of the land was stolen and whatever, bitty goes all of that.
Yes.
And all that. It's not the case.
Okay.
The final word is in our conversation later on it's going to show an embracing of Mexico and the United States that was the real outcome of this war.
Okay.
And it really gave Mexico, modern Mexico, the foundation that they needed in order to succeed and to prosper in the beloved Mexico that we know nowadays. So this is a stepping stone.
But you know that the majority of the Mexicans are going to disagree with you with that.
I hope that they would listen to what I have to say because there's an immense amount of actual factual information that led to the point. The final embrace.
Yeah, because even people that don't read books and stuff from Mexico, they all believe that the land was just stolen.
Okay, let me ask you one thing.
And taken, right?
If I'm going to pay you in $1848, $15 million, do you think there was a theft?
No.
Right, and there's contingent factors that go into that about we're going to write this off of the books in terms of piracy against U.S. shipping and all of this. Oh no, we'll pay for it for you. Don't worry about it. It's we write it off the book. So there were some factors there that you know what $15 million would be in today back then as calculated in today's currency. That's like astounding. You know?
Yeah,
that's like the Louisiana Purchase. And it wasn't stolen from France, you know.
Yeah, no, and you're right. There's a lot more factors.
Yeah,
you said there was already a little bit of some of the states that you mentioned, Baja California.
Yeah,
that were trying to separate from Mexico at the time.
There was serious.
All that, I guess, also play a role.
You better believe
to
the final outcome.
The final outcome.
And Mexico knew this. I mean, when I say Mexico, my wife is from Mexico City, and she says, "Well, it happened in Mexico." I said, "Where?" DF in Mexico. Okay, is it Mexico or is it the DF? In Mexico City.
Yeah.
The prevailing thought was, you know, in a certain way too, you know, and that has to be considered. You know. But again, you entered into these conversations with a delicacy of trying to consider that it all tended to build a history for us that led to the present life that we have. You know, I'm not gonna have any animosity towards Mexico or the United States for that matter. The Mexican Revolution, there's a huge amount of animosity that was, fomented, that was stirred up about that. That's not where we're at. That's not where we should go.
Yeah.
In saying animosities or, hey, you're at fault.
Yeah.
Nobody at fault.
All right, Eugene. I guess before we finish off, because of the Battle of Palo Alto, people. Or let me rephrase. After the Battle of Palo Alto, it marked the beginning of the Mexican-American War, right? In the history books.
Once war was declared, remember I told you about that that headline? Once the war was declared, you got a flag placed on the plains of civilization, on history, that stated, well, this is a turning point. It's huge. I mean, what happened when war was declared by Wilson in the First World War? You know, what happened there with the bombing of Pearl Harbor? It is a stopping point.
Yes,
and a readjustment. And a lot of times it's very costly.
Yeah,
but for whatever reasons it occurs.
And maybe the war between Mexico and the U.S. was going to happen regardless.
It was.
But it did start it here in with the Battle of Palo Alto. It could have happened somewhere else, but it here in Brownsville we have something that marks history.
Right.
Let me
leave you with a thought that's going to, I guess, and I'll go into it later, but people say, all right, which is the most, when you say starts here, what is the most historic city in Texas?
I don't know.
You're going to say San Antonio, right?
Yes.
All right, let me ask you this. This is a trick question. Forgive me. Of world path events, world-class crossings of destiny that occurred in Texas, how many of them were out of San Antonio? Can you remember one?
No.
Yeah, you can. The Alamo.
Well, I'm sorry. Yes, of course, but I'm trying to think. Like any more.
The major focus in terms of their claim, and I love San Antonio.
Yeah.
There's only 3 cities I would live in this United States: New Orleans, San Antonio, and Brownsville. The major claim by the San Antonios is, we're the most historic city. That's grand, and like I say, I love San Antonio.
Yeah.
But if you take the missions out of San Antonio, you don't have destiny crossings. You see, of it being the most foundation of being the most historic city in Texas. But Brownsville has about, I'm going to actually write another chapter in my next book about it. Brownsville has about 5 star-crossed destiny points in its history. And I'll run down a couple of them very quickly. Number 1, start of the Mexican War, right?
Yes.
Okay. Number 2 is the Cotton Blockade, the Cotton Road during the Civil War, where Matamoros and Brownsville and Baghdad and all that. That was, because that was international. There was a blockade that was brought against the entire South at the time, and the Gulf was the region that all shipping was blockaded. So we came through Mexico, through Baghdad. Okay, so that is the second one right there.
Okay.
The third one is the German incursion in World War I for 1916 and the declaration of war with Mexico. Okay.
Wow.
Okay. I'm sorry, with Germany, but with Mexico's cooperation in this against the Germans. My uncle was involved in that. Wow. Have you ever heard of the Zimmermann telegram? Zimmermann note?
Never.
Okay. Zimmermann was the German ambassador, or the attaché, diplomatic attaché between the United States and Germany. At World War I, we're talking about 1916 and that range. Okay, fine. Why was it so mystifying that you had all kinds of what they call raids here on the border, all the way from Las Cruces, New Mexico to Brownsville and all of that? Because Germany, true story, Germany asked Mexico to go on sides with them to get United States tied up in here in war rather than going and joining the Europeans in their war over there with the Kaiser. Okay, get them tied up over here. And the carrot that they waited on, so you join us in this, we're going to win this war, we're going to give you back the lands of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo.
Oh.
It happened right here in Brownsville. And the way that it happened was there was the raid in Olmito, where the so-called bandidos came through and they stopped that train and they killed some passengers on it. I don't know if you know about that. And they set fire to the trestle bridge and all that. The Carrancistas were involved at that time, let's say. And Morris Edelstein was on that train, and he's of Jewish descent, but from the German part of the world. And he heard them say, okay, no, spare them because it's Alemán. They were not killing the Germans. And that,
Alemán.
Yeah, they got the United States authorities wondering what is going on here. And there were several other little occurrences that took place along the border. And come to find out, there was always a German over in the corner with with the trench coat on and all of that. And he was calling the shots with his counterpart from Mexico. It absolutely happened. And then what happened was that my grandfather's sister was married to the German ambassador, and they encountered a letter, a telegram, Zimmermann telegram, that was mainly decoded by number 10 Downing Street by the cryptographers that had there, that said, they revealed this plot that the Germans were going to go on the side of Mexico. And so they saw that. My uncle, who was in the room at the time, saw that note, took off his glasses, took out his passport. He says, I am no longer a German citizen. I'm a citizen of Mexico. And about that same week, or the same day, they communicated with President Wilson, and war was signed in the next week. Wow. So you see how Brownsville played into that. Okay, then that's the next one. Then you get on up into the time of the Second World War. Do you know what the B-29 is?
The bomber.
Beautiful bomber.
Yes.
I mean, the heart of aeronautical engineering. It was test flown here at our airport.
Really?
Yeah. For the first initial was someplace in Utah or something like that, but they packed up the whole gear, brought it to Brownsville, Texas, to our airport here, and did the final testings out over the Laguna Madre. Plus, get this, the bomb bay on that, they lowered the first jet combat engines out of that and tested them under a B-29 here in Brownsville.
Wow.
You see there? And then, of course, going on with our history, we have, the Star Base and all of that. So you tell me, where is the most historic city in Texas? There's a foundation to that.
The only thing is that man, the Alamo, that battle for the Alamo, it's just so incredible. That
what about the Battle of Goliad?
Yeah,
they massacred all of them. It was the same situation. Didn't get the press that the Alamo did. But the beautiful history of the missionary era of post-conquest and the Spanish incursion into this range. Remember, I told you it was a no man's land of a combination of the Apaches and the Comanches and the whole thing. For them to do that beautiful period of the missions in San Antonio is is huge. And look at the architecture. You've seen them, haven't you?
Yeah.
Oh, you know.
Well, maybe in the future we can do we can all work together to give this information to the people so they can know the history. I mean, all this 5 important facts in
broaden
history.
It out.
Yes. Right? Yeah, we can do a better job, I guess, if we all work together.
You bet you we can. And it makes life so much more interesting when we have the full spectrum.
Yeah. All right, Eugene Fernandez, thank you. It was an honor to have you here. I'm pretty sure that people are going to learn a lot from this podcast.
I hope so.
I know they will. And I didn't want to read too much into the battle because I wanted to learn, through the podcast. Yeah. That way that people that were in the same situation as me, they can learn with the podcast about the Battle of Palo Alto and everything that was around it.
That's right. The leading factors and then the subsequent factors and all of that. And mind you, that we've covered today may seem like a huge amount, but it's only a drop in the bucket from what happened at that monumental battle and what happened afterwards. So it's all part of what made our history, our heritage. Eugene, I'm pretty sure that we're going to have another one. You bet. So thank you very much. You're the questions that you ask are spot on. Yeah. So yeah, let's do it. All right, Eugene. Thank you. Next time.